BK, Nate Jackson, never any doubt on this Broncos Monday night 41-32 win over our good pal Shelby Harris and the Broncos. Jerry Jeudy, a career night. Jameis Winston both giveth and taketh away 497 yards. 6 touchdown passes if you count the 2 pick sixes that Nick Bonito and Jaquan McMillan snagged. Now the Broncos head to the bye week. They are 8-5 and feeling really good now with a full 2 weeks or 13 days until they host the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a perfect game by any means. The defense that's been top 3 defense in the NFL thus far got gashed today by Jameis Winston. But as you said, he giveth, he taketh, he giveth, and he gaveth quite a bit at the end there. And Jameis is going to end up doing that, and the Broncos defense hung with it. They gave up over 500 yards of offense, almost 500 yards passing from Jameis Winston. But they came up with the big plays when that mattered. A couple big interceptions, taken back to the house, 3 picks. Cody Barton wanted to take that one back to the house. He was trying. But offensively, not Bo Nix's best game. But he made the plays he had to make to win. And so, 13 games before their bye, which is pretty unprecedented. That's a lot of games to play before getting a week off. It's going to come at a much-needed time. 4 games left. They get to get away, recharge the battery a little bit. Who knows where they'll go, Cabo, Hawaii, or just stay local. I say they stay local.
I think it'll be a mixture. I know some guys will try to find a beach. Some guys will stay here. They'll need treatment. One guy that is probably going to need treatment isn't going to likely get to go back to Iowa or anywhere else is Riley Moss. Yeah. I don't think we realized how valuable he was until he didn't play tonight. He's dealing with the knee issue. And so even though you got Zach Allen back, you're without Riley Moss. You're still pretty healthy. Just like a year ago, this team late in the year has stayed healthy. And so you have to be excited about that heading into this final stretch. But when Pat Surtain was on Jerry Jeudy for, I believe, 34 snaps, 34 pass routes, 2 catches, 20 yards. The other 23, he had 7 for 215, I guess, if he had 235. So quick math on that. And we know he had that big score. It came right after the Broncos' perhaps biggest play of the season. Just a couple of weeks ago against the Falcons, we saw Bo Nix make his best throw to date on that deep shot to Devon Vele, kind of in that intermediate range, a little bit deeper, but not 50, 60, 70 yards. This ends up being a 93-yarder to Marvin Mims. Before we hear from Sean Payton, Bo Nix, and Marvin Mims himself, what are you thinking when that ball leaves Bo's hands? Because we saw him early hitting guys, and they weren't necessarily helping him out. Then we saw him a little off the mark, and it was just kind of an up-and-down game. He did throw some darts, for sure. But as that ball is being thrown and you see Denzel Ward in coverage coming over, what's going through your mind?
I thought that ball was going to get picked. Bo hung a couple deep ones up there today. Still doesn't have, I can't say he doesn't have it because that was actually a perfect throw. Now, the safety, he's going to go back and look at himself and think he should have made that play. He should have, batted it down, but he didn't. Maybe he took a bad angle. Defensive players don't necessarily always have the best hands, the best ball skills. And so Marvin Mims benefited from that, made an enormous play. And he hit it. He hit him right down the seam. And you're going to hear him talk about the turkey hole. He hit him right in the turkey hole.
We wanted to put speed at 2, where Mims was, and then we were outside with speed and Sutton, and we kind of hit that turkey hole. Sometimes that ball might go outside. It was a heck of a throw and catch, and a huge play.
So we heard about the turkey hole. We're going to get into that in a little bit. Brandon's going to school me up on what the turkey hole is. But he ran right down the seam. Bo talked about those 3 verticals, 3 guys just going deep, and they got to look in the middle of the field like they wanted the Tampa 2, those safeties getting really wide, and the Mike linebacker carrying Marvin Mims, and he can't run with him. And so this is a play that is a staple of Sean Payton's offense. Run that seam down the middle, and if it opens up like that, it's going to be money.
It was 3rd and long. We were trying to be aggressive and go for the first down. And, we just kind of had 3 verticals getting to 3 spots on the field. And they played 2 Tampa invert. Their corners were going back. And, as soon as I saw the Mike kind of carry, they only do that in Tampa too. So I knew it was a 2-on-1 to the field. And Marvin, with his speed, just had to get it out there. And, he did a great job splitting the field. And, their guy couldn't get to it. And just kind of heard the crowd go crazy, and it was one of those awesome plays that you don't get often, but they're pretty fun.
And so you love to see Marvin Mims get involved like that, a guy who drafted last year, they had a hard time getting him involved in the offense, trying to figure out where Marvin fits in, put him in the backfield. That seems to have unlocked his potential and made him really comfortable moving around, fly sweeping, and now running vertically down the field. Let's hear from Marvin Mims about that shot.
Weird and surreal, wasn't it?
To be honest, I've been in a couple games like this, playing in the Big 12 in college. I mean, it's crazy, but to be in this type of game in the NFL, I mean, this is definitely my first. So it was wild, but playing in those games in college, I mean, you just kind of got to be ready for your number and whenever it's called and go back out there and make plays.
All right, that was Marvin Mims talking about the turkey hole shot, but you got some verification on what the turkey hole is, BK.
So you and I had this conversation after Sean Payton spoke. We talked turkey hole before Bo Nix had a chance to come in. And so I was like, let me see if I can catch Sean Payton in the locker room. I didn't. But I did catch Cortland Sutton because a year ago, Sean Payton's talking about the turkey hole, and that's what he called the area in cover 2. So you've got a corner here, safety there, that sideline shot that, where you're fitting it behind the corner who's in that zone coverage and before the safety can come over. He definitely called that the turkey hole. Well, clearly today when he was talking about the turkey hole, he was talking about what looked like a seam route to Marvin Mims. So are they both turkey holes? I couldn't find Sean, but I did catch Cortland Sutton after his press availability. I said, hey, you need to clear something up because I can't find Sean, and I didn't see any other offensive coaches. I knew Cortland would give me the skinny on what the turkey hole is, and we're kind of both right. Sean certainly refers to that cover 2 area as the turkey hole, as he did a year ago, but any tight window throw down the field. So the dump off
between two guys converging,
yes,
right? Between two coverages, and you saw a turkey hole can be everywhere, not just on the sideline versus cover 2, but down the seam versus Tampa 2, or down the seam versus a cover 1, or if it's probably a cover 3. There's turkey holes everywhere if you're looking for them, right? And so either way, Marvin Mims, the beneficiary of that, one of the longest plays we've seen it in Power Field offensively ever, maybe ever. And so you got to love that for this young offense. But let's talk about the other side of the ball, because the defense, like we started off saying here, one of the best defenses in the NFL, didn't necessarily look like that today.
Yeah, and their third down numbers weren't great, and that's usually an indicator of how things are going. Their 2 worst games on third down were just 2 of their worst games. Against the Chargers, where the Chargers early were like 11 of 13. I think it got a little slower later in the game when the Broncos scored those kind of empty points. And then against the Ravens were really good when they got to third down. The Ravens didn't even get to third down that much. But otherwise, the Broncos have been one of the best defenses in football on third down. Tonight, they weren't for the majority of the game, and even as it was starting to get a little better defensively, they were still like 6 of 12 in the middle of the third quarter. The Browns at times were able to extend drives, but both teams did score quickly enough. It was a really long game, a lot of points, and so we saw where we thought Jameis was going to be sacked early, and they didn't really get great pressure. Jonah Ellis got a 0-yard sack in the first half. In the second half, they started to get there a little more, and they obviously started to disrupt them, and I think you know what Jameis is, and so it's both good and bad. That's how he can have 33 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in the same year. So in a game where he has the 4 touchdowns, as we touched on, the 2 pick sixes, but the one to Nick Bonito, you're like, okay, it was only a matter of time. Yeah. Then the one to McMillan, and then the one to Barton late. It's hard to beat up a defense that, in this case, bends, but ultimately doesn't break because they get enough from their offense. But there's no way that even though they're going to have a week off, Vance Joseph and his staff are going to love when they look at the film, and BJ may look at it earlier than everyone else. Yeah. But there's obviously plenty of plays that they wish they had. And going back to what we started with, they missed Riley Moss, and there's clearly a big gap between Riley Moss and Levi Wallace right now.
Yeah, Levi Wallace, one of the worst performances I've seen out of a defensive back in a long time. I usually don't point the fingers at people after that, but his body language was awful. I mean, I was standing out here watching, and he just looked like he didn't want to be out there. I mean, he was just getting beat off the line. Jerry Jeudy was like beating him with these head fakes, and he's just standing there as Jerry goes the other way for that 2-point conversion, and it was just a big drop-off there between Riley and Levi, even though Levi has all these starts under his belt in Pittsburgh. Just kind of seemed like he didn't want to be out there to me. But the defense showed up when they had to. It wasn't pretty, over 500 yards. Sean Payton talked about that fact. The defense, maybe not their best performance ever, but they showed up when they had to. Here's Sean Payton.
When we go back and look at that tape, we're going to look at a lot of things defensively that we would have done differently. We have to. And yet, we had 2 interceptions for touchdowns, a third interception. I told him in the locker room, look, it wasn't pretty, and yet in the end, we did what we had to do, especially late.
Now, there was Sean Payton. Now, your quarterback, who's not playing his best game ever, really does appreciate a good defensive performance, and Bo Nix also spoke about that, getting the plays they needed to get from the defense, even though it wasn't the defense's best performance. Here's Bo talking about his defense.
I saw 3 turnovers in key parts of the game, and it's not only turnovers are hard to get, but to return them for touchdowns, that's even harder. So, and the fact that they did it twice, it was crazy. It's kind of nice, I'm over there sitting. The bench is you got the heaters over there, and I don't even have to move, so it's pretty nice for the offense when they bail us out like that. But it was just a complete team win. We made our plays, got a lot to grow from, and then they made their plays. They got a lot to grow from. So it's good to have a bye week this week, and then we're going to come back and grow from it.
So before we get out of here, we're still talking about the defense here, and let's talk about Nick Bonito, because Nick Bonito is coming on really strong the second half of the season, maybe making a case for Defensive Player of the Year. What do you think, BK?
Well, I tweeted as much, and somebody came underneath in a subtweet and said, what about PS2? Because I said, with Myles Garrett on the field, Myles Garrett almost a non-factor tonight for the second year in a row on this exact same field. Credit to Garrett Bowles. I understand he had a couple big penalties, certainly a really big one after a big game that was going to set up second and short. And then Mike McGlinchey as well, although Myles did seem to line up more against Garrett in what seemed to be your more important downs. But Myles Garrett, who is the reigning defensive MVP, had a huge game against the Steelers, called out T.J. Watt, basically. T.J. Watt comes back, has a really big game yesterday against the Bengals. Those guys are very high on the list, as is PS2. But I mentioned that Nick Bonito has entered the chat, and someone said PS2 entered the chat. I think PS2 was in the chat. But if you're going to give it to a pass rusher, because I can make the case for PS2, and I think a lot of people can. Don't know if he'll get enough votes, and maybe he and Nick Bonito split votes. But Nick Bonito now has either 10.5 or 11 sacks. I don't know how it was credited because Jonathan Cooper cleaned that up. But he's right there with Myles Garrett, who definitely only has 10 sacks because he did not sack Bo Nix, I don't believe. And so he is now ahead of Myles Garrett on one of the best defenses in football. They're going to have a month to make their case and close it out, each of these players. Obviously, those other guys still have 5 games. The Broncos only have 4 games left. But Nick Bonito certainly has to be considered in that Defensive Player of the Year conversation because not only the ability to get to the quarterback, but also the pick six, and he talked about all of that in the locker room postgame.
I don't know about that. It looked like the guy was going to catch me there for a little bit, but thank God he got gas, so I was able to get that.
How big was this win going into the bye week? That Colts game, had you lost to them next week after losing the bye week, you guys could have been behind in this wild card race.
Yeah, it was really huge, and not only for just the playoff race and stuff like that, but just for the team morale going into the bye week. Much rather we would go on and win than a loss. So just really proud of the guys.
What does it show about this defense, the fact that you did give up that many points and this many yards, but you were able to step up when they needed you to?
Yeah, just the toughness of not only our defense, but the team. When need be, no matter what the situation is, we're going to find a way to win, and that's what we did.
So Nick Bonito kind of coming on at the right time. It's going to be interesting. They just paid Jonathan Cooper, and we can get into this on off-field a little later on. But every time he makes plays, you're like, well, there's another $1 million a year, whatever the number is. They can wait a year to give him that new deal, and they probably will to start a training camp or early in the year next year. But Nick Bonito is going to be the highest paid defensive player on the Broncos. I think he will jump ahead of Pat Surtain the way things are going. And if he ends up getting real Defensive Player of the Year votes, you're going to have no choice but to really back up that Brinks truck.
Yeah, I just love the way the energy he's playing with, the type of energy that these guys are feeding off one another with. They clearly like playing together. They have bought into Sean Payton's message. They're remarkably healthy for having 13 straight games without a bye week yet. So this team, who's 8-5 right now, firmly in the playoff hunt, now gets to take a week off and rest. I know there's some concern that they might lose the rhythm. I know you asked that. But it is what it is, and you got to get back to work after the week. But Sean Payton is such a seasoned coach. He knows how to deal with every step in the road. 17 seasons at the helm. He knows how to deal with a bye week. These Broncos go into this bye week 8-5, controlling their own destiny, BK. And you got to feel good here in Broncos country.
And speaking of the bye week, we found this out about Sean Payton coach teams last year, and I don't know when it started in New Orleans, but he looked around at who does the best after a bye, and it's been Andy Reid, whether it was in Philly or in Kansas City. He calls up his pal Andy Reid and says, hey, what do you do that you'll share with us, but what do you do going into the bye that you're so good coming off of a bye? And he said he cuts everybody loose, coaches, players, everybody that left this building tonight, unless you have to go get treatment. Coaches don't have to go in to watch film tomorrow. They don't have to go back to their office tonight to worry about anything like you might after a regular season game. If you've got a game plan you want to get ready for, you want to get a jump, these guys are cut loose, and they'll be going to maybe Mexico, Cali, Arizona, staying here, going to the mountain. No,
I think they're doing exactly what Andy Reid told them to do.
They did it last year too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just happened today.
Andy Reid told him to do the opposite of what he actually does because he really wants to beat him because they're in the same division.
Well, that's now. I don't think he called him last year. I think it was years ago when he called him. But that's sort of Sean Payton knowing which buttons to push.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's, hey, we'll have plenty of time to get ready for the Colts, where they were in an okay spot last year around their bye week, if memory serves me right, as they were trending up. But now, like you said, firmly in the playoff picture at 8-5. Definitely controlling their own destiny, playing the teams chasing them in the coming weeks, and the team they're trying to leapfrog in the Chargers. And so I think that it's a good thing that Sean Payton is sticking to his guns, listening to Andy Reid.
Yeah.
And I know you obviously had probably different experiences with how Mike Shanahan would handle the bye, but I
similar.
And so I think that it's, and they all do kind of come from that same West Coast Bill Walsh tree. I mean, Sean is a few more limbs away, but nonetheless, it works. So the Broncos, who were able to hold on and get this win, now get 6 days off, and they will be in the office Monday morning. Maybe some coaches make it in Sunday afternoon to get a jump on what Monday looks like.
Yeah, my recollection with Shanahan, I think that we may have come in the next day, got a run and a lift, and then we were off. And didn't come back until the next Monday, because you come back the next Monday and then you get Tuesday off anyway. Then you're back to your regular scheduled Wednesday, Thursday, Friday work week. And that's what the Broncos have to look forward to right now. Most of the season in the books, the Broncos 8-5. BK, a huge win at home versus the Cleveland Browns. I'm Nate Jackson. He's Brandon Krisztal. We'll see you guys later. Broncos won. Guerrilla Sports.